don't think any of it's that huge, but it's not good. It's definitely starting your season off on the wrong foot. Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Buckets. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video if you're over on YouTube to help it do better in the algorithm. That is much appreciated. Also check us out over on Apple Podcast and Spotify to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. That link will be in the description. We are back with some NBA news. We have a fairly beefy episode for us here since we've had some preseason and we also have missed the last Monday upload. Luckily, this is also the last one that we're going to be doing before the NBA season is here, so we should hopefully have these things stuffed full of content going forward. But with that said, let's get into what news we can glean from the 2024 preseason. First, we have Bleacher Report's winners and losers of the preseason, which we're going to use as like a guiding force to just discussing the preseason at large. First is Dalton Knecht of the Los Angeles Lakers, who just had a fucking ridiculous game on Thursday where he scored 20, I believe, of the last 22 points for the Lakers in a really close game, and I believe it also even went into overtime. He was hitting a bunch of ridiculous shots like that, falling out of the corner, deep ass threes. I think he hit a game tying three to send it into overtime. That was a really deep shot. So he's been phenomenal. And of course, he was really the only major player addition that the Lakers made this offseason, other than, I guess, Bronny James as well. But Dalton Knecht looks like he can step right into an actual NBA level role. That makes sense given that he was a multiple year college player, and that's a big reason why he ended up going a little bit later in the draft than he probably otherwise would have if he had displayed this level of talent at a younger age. But I would not be surprised at all if he ends up being a rather crucial part of the rotation for the Los Angeles Lakers, because they have always needed shooting. They need big wings, which he services as. He's not just a three-point shooter, he's a pretty solid finisher and athlete as well. And it makes sense given that JJ seems to have an emphasis on three-point shooting with this team, which isn't necessarily a surprise. Dalton Knecht should definitely fit right in. There was, of course, that big report when they added him to the roster about how he was like drawing out plays for Dalton right out of the gate. 35 points against Phoenix. He should be good. It's nice that he's looked good out of the gate for sure for the Lakers. Look forward to Lakers fans dramatically overrating him though, because that's just the cycle here. We got another white boy in LA who's competent, so he's the second coming of Christ. A loser is unfortunately OKC and Isaiah Hartenstein, and I definitely agree with this assessment overall just because of the fact that he got an injury and is going to be evaluated in 5 to 6 weeks as to whether or not he can actually be playing again. And the unfortunate aspect of this is that this is not the time that you want to miss. Towards the start of the season, especially as a new addition to a team that has a long history together, or at least some history together and chemistry together, you want to make sure that you are fitting in and you're getting a good idea of the game plan out of the gate. Obviously, the guys had a training camp and all of that, which helps, but I don't feel great about the fact that he is going to be coming into the fold here after like the first month of the NBA season. He was great when he played and looks like he's well worth the $30-something million a year they gave him. I really like the versatility that he gives OKC with the ability to put Chet at the 4, have him be your backup 5 essentially, and then Isaiah Hartenstein is like, as a player, he's about as good at offense as you can be as a 5 without being like a major lob target or a three-point shooting threat. Like his playmaking hub ability and his automatic push shot like just makes him super effective on that end of the floor, on top of the fact that he adds a defensive presence and the double bigs combination with him and Chet that was not there previously, especially given that size was one of the bigger concerns for OKC last year. So it sucks that he's not going to be there to start the season. I wouldn't say they're outright like some major losers, because on the flip side, Isaiah Hartenstein did look great when he played, and the Thunder did look fucking great when he played. So sucks he's not going to be here, but I'm not too concerned about the long-term implications of it. Just a little bit of awkward chemistry after about the first month of the season, but nothing that I think is anywhere near like derailing their season territory. But it's not good, that's for sure. This guy I've only seen a little bit of, so I can't give too strong of an opinion, but I have seen a little bit of this Tyler Kolek guy who has done a lot of really good playmaking from what I have seen. This article is highlighting that Kolek might actually become the backup point guard for this team because Deuce McBride is more of a wing, more of a off guard than he is an on guard, even if he can do a little bit of that stuff. His per 36 averages this preseason 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 10 assists to just 2 turnovers, as well as 3.5 made three-pointers. That is pretty great. Obviously, I don't think he would have that kind of opportunity or production at the NBA level, but that kind of playmaking ability off of the bench, the 3-ball going in, that's a nice addition to have. And the Knicks bench is a big concern for them. So if they actually landed a dude who can genuinely be a real rotation piece in the playoffs, then that is a massive win. The losers are, of course, the Los Angeles Clippers. No one really has high expectations for them going into this year, but they especially are not going to if Kawhi Leonard misses a prolonged period of time, which is looking more and more likely. He has been ruled out indefinitely, which is not the time frame that you want to see. That could mean anything from a month to the entire fucking year. I honestly think the Clippers should just bite the bullet and trade Kawhi and James Harden and pretty much every valuable role player that they have on the team. But I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon, or at least not until the trade deadline. A big winner is, of course, Lonzo Ball, who just played his first game in just over 1,000 days since January 14th, 2022. And he was great. He played like 10, 12 minutes, scored like 11 points, I think, hit 3 3-pointers, got a block on Julius Randle, I think a steal on a lob pass into him as well. He had his defensive impact, and then he hit all of his jump shots, essentially. He was lasered in, and he looked exactly as good as he did when we last saw him. Obviously, there is a lot of, there's the factor that this was just a 15-minute stretch, so as this article is citing, you don't want to ascribe some super profound value to it, but for the first time in almost 1,000 days to look like you haven't lost a step at all, that is definitely not nothing. Now, what that actually means for the Bulls season at large, I don't know that there's going to be that much, other than arguably it could be a little bit of a negative with Lonzo making them better than they otherwise should be and hurting their lottery odds. But if I had to guess, I'd say he plays a good amount, assuming that health permits, and the Bulls trade him at the deadline, because there really isn't much reason for him to be here at this current time. The Bulls are not going to be competitive for the next at least 2 to 3 seasons, and I think Lonzo's services could be best used elsewhere, on top of the fact that Chicago already has a rather deep guard rotation, including, unfortunately, 3 guards that they view as future guys. I would say there are 2 that are actually future long-term guys, those being Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White, but they, of course, also want to give opportunity to Josh Giddey. So, yeah, Lonzo Ball probably won't be here that long if he does end up playing, but hopefully this does mean that his career can be turned around. I cannot emphasize enough, it might be a 15-minute stretch of basketball, but it's the first stretch he's played in 1,000 days, and he looked like he was there yesterday. That's huge, and it was very nice to see. I'm very excited for Lonzo Ball, because he's a really, 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 really good starting caliber player when he's healthy, and he could contribute to just about any contender in the league. And I imagine, given his injury history, the asking price is not going to be too high. You probably can give not very good first-round pick and a matching contract and add Lonzo Ball to your roster, and I could end up seeing that being a rather large swing factor for a contending level team this season. Another loser we have here, of course, is the Philadelphia 76ers, who had some injury stuff in the preseason. Injuries are the #1 thing you're trying to avoid in the preseason, and unfortunately they got 2 of them to their major players. Now, Joel Embiid getting some small stuff. He had a left knee injury. That's to be expected. They're taking him with precaution here going forward. He specifically said there's no real narrative or agenda going into this season for him. He doesn't care about winning MVP. He doesn't care about anything like that. He just simply wants to be healthy and ready to go for this postseason. So he said that he no longer expects to play back-to-back games, and I do think that is overall a positive thing for them. I realize there is the negative connotation of Joel Embiid's probably not going to be there for 20, 30 games this season. But frankly, as long as you're able to keep yourself in the postseason picture away from that play-in territory, if Maxey and Paul George can be good enough to keep you in that conversation and still a consistently good team when Joel Embiid is not playing, then this is overall a better thing. I would rather see Joel Embiid not play back-to-backs than like work his ass off just to still play 65 games and just to be injured in the postseason. So I think that's actually more of a positive than anything else, but unfortunately, another player that I just mentioned, Paul George, also sustained an injury, and it was also a non-contact injury. It was a hyperextended knee, so it shouldn't be big. There's no structural damage or anything like that, but there's a chance he won't be there at the start of the season. And as I mentioned with Hartenstein, especially with an addition as large as Paul George, you don't want to go into your year building a new chemistry and a new idea of what your team is supposed to be before you actually have your primary edition of the offseason available. I don't think any of it's that huge, but it's not good. It's definitely starting your season off on the wrong foot. The winner is apparently three-point shooting enthusiasts. I think this is because of the Celtics. A big boogeyman that I have been pointing to for the last couple of years is that there's actually generally a threshold of three-point shooting volume where it starts to become a negative, but we saw with the Boston Celtics that they pushed the limits of that rather dramatically. They shot more three-pointers than any championship team ever, more three-pointers than any team in the league last year. There was the factor of like, well, if they have an off shooting night, what do they look like? And they definitely had a couple of those games here or there, but they have enough great shooting that maybe one guy or another guy was having an off night, but they were still able to get away with that. Hell, they were still able to get away with that with their two best players and their two most high volume three-point shooters, shooting like 32% for the entire postseason. Unfortunately, I would say this is an L because I don't particularly enjoy the Boston Celtics play style. I think when you increase your three-point volume to that degree, it starts to feel like you're just chucking shots, which is generally the shot chucking moniker is one that I feel is almost a little bit of a dog whistle towards just dudes who hate jump shots and three-point shooting. So on that front, I think that criticism is often overused, but if we're getting at the point where most teams, over half of the teams nearly, are taking 40 three-pointers per 100 possessions, like literally 4 out of every 10 possessions is ending in a three-point shot, I think that's a little extreme, and I think that's, I don't know if a lot of other NBA teams are actually going to be able to hold the candle to how Boston does it. Like, it reminds me a little bit of the increased three-point volume that we saw from teams post Golden State's initial success, and it was like, yeah, you guys can employ the same strategy that we do, but the Warriors still had a huge advantage within that strategy for a very long stretch of time because, hey, we have Steph and Klay Thompson and then eventually Kevin Durant on top of that, so you guys can start playing like us all you want, but are you going to play like us as well as we do? I don't really think there are going to be many NBA teams that can play Boston's high three-point volume play style and actually find major success with it. I imagine this is mostly a preseason thing that we will see gradually decline throughout the actual season, but it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a historic amount of three-point attempts out of the gate. Not that we don't see that almost every year anyways. Our official first annual Rusty Buckets preseason surprise award, we're going to be giving this to Ryan Dunn, who has been a fantastic role player for the Phoenix Suns so far in this preseason, and one that is very much needed. So he was drafted last year towards the end of the first round, 28th pick in 2024, and he was labeled as the best defender in the draft by many, a very, very, very strong defensive player, defensive wing, who unfortunately had a broken jump shot, which is the reason that he went as late as he did. We have seen this archetype of like athletic, defensive-minded wing who doesn't really have much of a jump shot. That archetype of player has seen less and less opportunity in the NBA as time has been going on. So it makes sense that he ended up going as late as he did, but through the preseason, he has hit more three-pointers on less attempts by a considerable margin than he did in his entire tenure in college. Over 65 games in college, he went 12 for 51. In 5 preseason games, he went 13 for 31, including a game where I believe he hit 5 or 6 3-pointers. So if that 3-point shot is legit and he can just at the bare minimum be a catch and shoot guy while being one of the better perimeter defenders in the NBA, then he could be a very pivotal rotation piece. Dare I say even a starting caliber guy, because when I think to the other guys who are starting, you have like Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal is a good defender, but Ryan Dunn could probably be a better one. So if the 3-point shot also looks legit, he seems like he can play both forward spots. I would probably actually go with him over Royce O'Neal. You keep Grayson Allen for the 3-point shooting because that level of 3-point shooting will not be matched by neither Dunn nor O'Neal. But yeah, I think Ryan Dunn should be a huge addition for them. Also, just a quick note about the Phoenix Suns in general. I have liked a lot of what I have seen from their offense under Mike Budenholzer. Looks like there's going to be a large swing in terms of how they're approaching the game, looking for a more team-oriented approach rather than just Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal taking turns isolating. And if that ends up holding true, if their offense is more complex and they've just added this really strong defensive rookie who could be a big contributor out of the gate, I might have to eat a little bit of crow about the Phoenix Suns. Now, they're not going to be, I still don't think they're going to be one of the best teams in the West in terms of like being in the top 3 of that territory, because I'm pretty confident Dallas, Denver, and OKC at least will be better. Memphis has a pretty good shot of being better. Minnesota has a pretty good shot of being better. But if 2 out of those 5 teams, Phoenix ended up being better than, and even ended up looking better in the postseason, I wouldn't actually be all that surprised, because their defense can be solid, and then the offense, the big issue that existed for them last year was the simplicity of their offense, the stagnant nature of their offense, and it resulted in them having the worst fourth quarter offense in the entire NBA, despite the fact that they have a shitload of very, very talented offensive players individually. Their scheme just did not really elevate them and allow them to be as impactful as they otherwise would be within a well-structured offense. So this could be a big sign for them. Ryan Dunn's defense and the playmaking scheme from Phoenix could be a big change. The other honorable mentions are, of course, Jaden Ivey, as you spelled his name wrong in that, I think. Ivory? Jaden Ivey. He has been shooting the piss out the ball thus far, both on pull-up 3-pointers, but especially on pull-up mid-range shots. Like, that shit right there just looked like Michael Jordan. You can't convince me otherwise. He had a weird second year because of Monty Williams and his unwillingness to play him alongside Cade Cunningham, which was a little bit weird, because if you're going to play the guy, or if you want to view him as a future piece, then you should play him alongside your even more major future piece. But there has always been this kind of feeling that Detroit actually wasn't that interested in keeping Ivey. That also permeated from the front office, who seemed to draft Ivey reluctantly. I believe, I know Nick has told me this story before, but it was something along the lines of like, they drafted him with the intention to trade him, and then they saw a really, really positive reaction to him being added to the roster, so they didn't want to end up trading him. But this new regime, new coach, they seem to be embracing Jaden Ivey, and he could be poised for a really big third-year leap as a result of that. Honestly, just having the franchise be confident in you and seem like they want you can do a lot for a player's confidence, and good confidence leads to good results. The other honorable mention is Zach Edey, who has definitely caught my eye thus far in the preseason, as he has been pretty much exactly what I expected him to be for the Memphis Grizzlies, which is he is a very, very good offensive option, both in terms of just finding him on, around the rim for easy dunks, easy dump-off passes, and he's been a really prolific post-scoring threat. Now, I don't know how much that will maintain itself throughout the regular season, given that there will be more options on the floor. They were trying to get a feel of how much his post-up ability can actually be utilized, but like the dude's hitting deep post hooks. He had a drop step move where he got a dunk. I can't remember who was defending him, but he just absolutely fucking obliterated that guy. Miles Turner? It was on Miles Turner? No, I'm pretty sure that was on Isaiah Jackson. Either way, Zach Edey looks great. I'm not a draft guy, so I can't speak to a lot of the doubts that happened with him. All I'll say is, while I understand this guy played a while, and this guy is a post-up player, how well does he translate? Well, if the post-ups is just something you're doing occasionally when the guy has a mismatch or you don't really have any better offense going to it, that's a lot better than him just being like the only offensive option you have like he was in Purdue. So I think a lot of the concerns about him were overblown, and I really like him in Memphis personally. A little bit of drama between the Knicks and Donte Demon-cenzo. Some back and forth between him and the Knicks bench. He later went on to say that there was nothing there, but he was kind of caught in 4K. There was direct footage of him very clearly talking shit to that bench. Whether that was directed at Tom Thibodeau. My original speculation was that it was directed at Miles McBride, just because he's probably the guy who will step up into that six-man role now that he's there. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know how much we get invested in preseason beef, but it is nice that we get a little taste of beef right out of the gate here. We got some Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame inductees. Jerry West getting in for a third time. What was the exact detail of him getting in for a third time? Because I know he made it as a player and a general manager. Is it because he's the logo? Is it like, I don't know. That's kind of weird, but hey, dude's in it 3 times, and I believe you said that makes him the only person who's ever done it 3 times, right? Yeah, so good for him. I don't know every name on this list. Michael Cooper, is this his first induction? Was this Walter Davis' first induction? Because he has some old dudes. These guys have been around for a while, so that's interesting that they wouldn't have been in at this point. Vince Carter, though, getting in for the Toronto Raptors. His speech, he was talking a lot about the Toronto Raptors, which I'm glad to see that time has healed that wound for the most part with people, because, like, what that guy means to that franchise, I understand he left on a sour note, but sometimes you need to reflect and look at, like, consider the context of the whole thing. Don't be sad because it's over, smile because it happened, that type of corny shit. I was glad to see that. It was very nice for sure. That is no longer a sore spot, even if it took a long-ass time for that to be the case. Apparently Herb Jones, according to Shams, is going to be their starting center, which is very interesting to me because I do think that it can work. But it also, in some ways, displays a level of desperation that the Pelicans have at the center position because, of course, they had Jonas Valanciunas for the past couple of years. They had Steven Adams there for a year, right? Am I mistaken? Yeah, that's dumb. They should have just kept Steven Adams, but whatever. They need a 5 that can space the floor, because on the offensive end of the floor, Zion is more or less a 5. Like, the offensive limitations that come with his lack of a jump shot, you really don't want to put another non-spacer on the floor. You don't want to be running 2 non-spacers in an NBA lineup today, really. You can get away with it from time to time, as the Pelicans have the last couple of years, even though technically Valanciunas does shoot well on threes. It's at a very, very low volume to a degree that it really might as well not even happen. That is a interesting predicament, because a actually good defensive 5 who can also space the floor is not a player that is very easy to add to your roster, because everybody wants that type of player, but there are only a couple of them that are actually super competent at the 3-point line. Like Miles Turner, Brook Lopez a little bit. Brook Lopez can be pretty inconsistent from 3. In his last couple of years, he hasn't been that great, but still, you know, he's in that archetype of player. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns isn't a defender, but he at least has the spacing aspect. And then there's like Wendell Carter Jr. Like, there's just not a lot of guys who can genuinely really do that. So their logic here is that Herb Jones, he's 6'8", 6'9", long arms, decent help side rim protector. He'll probably average a career high in blocks this year if he does play the 5, but he spaces the floor well. And my thinking is that between him and Zion, in terms of the defensive responsibilities, both in terms of rebounding the ball and just having size, I think splitting that job between the two of them could work against most NBA teams. Now, I wouldn't put Zion on Joel Embiid, but if he's playing Steven Adams, for example, I think he can handle that matchup well enough. Like, just be a strong body who doesn't let him bully him by any capacity, because Zion's like 270. probably at this point. He played closer to 300 at stages during his career with the Pelicans, but he said that he's closer to Duke weight, which is around 270, 280. He's a big dude. He might be short, but I think he can handle defending most centers in the NBA. And then you essentially have Herb as like your help side rim protector. Ideally, you put him on somebody who is not a great three-point shooting threat. You can essentially do a similar logic to the Minnesota Timberwolves, where you have Karl Anthony Towns just being the big body taking the center matchup, and then your actual rim protector, in that case Rudy Gobert, in this case Herb Jones, is actually left to be more of a freelance roaming around the rim type of guy. I think it makes sense and they can try it, but I also don't think this is a long-term solution. This is more like putting a band-aid on an open wound than it is actually finding your long-term plan at the center position. So we talked about this on the shoot-around the other day. Go check that out if you want to. We did a ranking of the most watchable teams in the NBA. But Alex Hoops pointed out that that strategy might also not be the best just because of the physicality that Zion would have to deal with. On one hand, I agree with that. On the other, I feel like if you're constantly pampering him and having him, Zion of all people, shying away from contact, it's probably going to make him even more delicate than it would otherwise just to have him deal with that throughout the year. And I don't know that Herb Jones has the weight on him. Look at that picture, dude. He's skinny as fuck, okay? He's not the strongest guy in the world. That's not really where his talent lies. So, I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely something to watch out for. Giannis says, yeah, if we don't win a championship, I might get traded. This is the job we live. This is the world we're living in. It's everybody. At any given moment, if you don't succeed, that might be it for us. If you don't do a good enough job, you're out. He said that to Sam Amick at The Athletic. Doc Rivers alludes to poor team communication, basically saying the team needs to hold each other accountable for mistakes and express grievances. So already we don't have a lot of good stuff coming out about the Bucks to start this season. I saw Isaac from the Deep 3 podcast. He tweeted something about like soft launching the breakup by acting like they're the ones that are no longer interested in you. That is kind of the vibe that I get from this, or it's like, oh man, they might trade me, and not, I might want to be traded. I don't know. I don't want to read into this too much. Giannis kind of makes a comment like this every single year. It's very interesting how consistent he is with like, I'm gonna put out the idea myself of me being traded every single time. But the reality is, I don't think the Bucks will trade Giannis until Giannis asks them to. I don't think there is much reason at all to jump ship on the Giannis front. Like, there are players who, if you have that guy, you don't trade him unless they ask you to, or unless you're really in a desperate situation, or you think they're going to leave in free agency, even though they've said they won't. But Giannis is on a long-term contract. He's not even, I don't think he's 30 yet. He's probably on the cusp of it, but surely he's not 30 yet. He's 29. Oh, he's about to be though. So I was right. He is on the cusp of it. Giannis is an all-time great talent. He will probably retire as a top 25 player of all time, even if he doesn't add a lot more to his resume for the rest of his career. So if you have that guy, especially if you're Milwaukee, you are not trading Giannis. So I think this is, like Isaac said, he's kind of soft launching, like, oh, maybe they don't want me either. Nah, they want you, bro. You're the one who wants out of this, possibly. Couple of small roster updates. The Kings signed Doug McDermott, and apparently, according to Matt Issa, apparently the Kings are interested in Brandon Ingram and Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine makes some sense. I can see Zach LaVine as an off guard because you can view him as essentially like a better version of Kevin Huerter. Brandon Ingram doesn't make any sense to me. Do not put Brandon Ingram and DeMar DeRozan on the same team. You're literally just getting, let me borrow an ism from Nick. This is same image.jpg, okay? Same play style, same type of dude who has the same issues. Brandon Ingram is a better three-point shooter, but he still does not take them at the volume that you would like. I think that's a mistake. Zach LaVine makes some sense, but unfortunately from a financial standpoint, I really don't think they could even make that happen either, because Other than Kevin Huerter's contract, maybe you could throw Malik Monk in there at that point, but I would honestly rather have Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk than Zach LaVine. So I don't know what that's about, but shout out to Matt Issa and shout out to the podcast that he hosts with Alex Hoops, the Media Pass. The Spurs waive Jalen McDaniels, which was apparently expected. The Blazers waived Devontae Graham. I'm honestly shocked that he was still on an NBA roster. Aaron Baines retires. Let's have a moment of silence. All right, and the Grizzlies sign Scottie Pippen Jr. to a multi-year contract, which, according to Rudy, now means that Memphis has 3 legitimate young rotational players on near minimum long-term deals. But yeah, that's it. NBA season will be here by the next episode, and it's right around the corner. It's the 18th, right? And it's the 22nd, so we are just 4 days away. I am so fucking excited for this season to finally start. Hopefully you are too. The coverage here has been ramping up lately, but we're going to be ramping it up even further with the season around the corner, so make sure to subscribe and like and check us out when we get there. But with that said, that is it. Goodbye.